Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Techie Turbo. My name is Joria Dahir, and I'll be your host for tonight's conversation. For those of you who may be new to Techie is a platform dedicated to highlighting innovation, entrepreneurship, technology, and the people building meaningful impact across our communities. Through these conversations, we aim to spotlight leaders, creators, and change makers who are helping shape a more connected and inclusive future. Tonight's conversation is one I'm especially excited about because it centers around community, family engagement, technology, access, and creating opportunities for young people to grow into leadership. I'm joined by someone whose work has deeply impacted families across Western New York through programming that makes technology feel accessible, welcoming, and incredibly empowering. Please join me in welcoming Rachel from TechBuffalo. Rachel, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, before we dive into the work itself, I always love just starting out with the person behind the mission. So, Rachel, can you share a little bit about your personal journey and what led you into this incredible work?
Hi, yes, absolutely. So my journey really started, I would say, as a child, right? Wanting to work within community, be in community, constant talking and trying to connect with individuals. And really where that started career-wise was as a social worker. So that is traditionally in my background. And so I would say a big part of my journey has really been shaped by belief that access changes everything. So I've really been drawn to work that sits at that intersection of education, community, and opportunity, especially when it comes to, helping young people, people of color, you really see what's possible for themselves. So the work that I do now at TechBuffalo, I really get to work on programs that connect students and families and educators and employers in a really tangible way. So a lot of that focuses on making tech accessible, for families, for communities, and really helping youth that potentially don't necessarily see themselves as that tech kid have an invite to that conversation and feel that they, should be in that space. And so, that's a little bit about my journey, about what's led me here.
Wow, I really didn't know that. I thought I knew you, Rachel. I'm learning a lot more about you.
Yeah.
Well, just echoing what you said, and I think it's always just so powerful for people to understand not just what someone does, but why they do it. So I'm wondering, Rachel, if you can touch a little bit more on your identity and some of your lived experience. How has your lived experience, for instance, influenced the way that you approach your work and even just the communities that you serve as a whole?
Yes, absolutely. And I really love this question because you're right. I think identity really shapes how we listen, the way that we build trust and the way that we understand access. So for me, I would say I definitely try to approach the work that I'm doing with a deep awareness that communities and identities have already been created, and that there's a lot of, I would say, brilliance and creativity within the communities that we create for ourselves. So my identity, of course, as a Black woman has been not that doors have not always been open for me, or hasn't always felt like the most welcoming space. And so what are ways that the role that I have, can change that for somebody else? And also, what are ways to continue to help remove barriers and really build alongside people? So I think that a lot of that really comes down to people feeling like they belong and feeling like they have a space. And so when I create programs and when I want to work with programs, I want it to first be led with the fact that everyone is welcome, and everyone, belongs in this space. And we will really try to make people feel invited and supported and know that they are very capable of succeeding.
No, that's amazing. I mean, I'm just hearing so much intentionality behind all the work that you're doing, echoing on access. But I want to touch on a little bit more on the family engagement part. In some of the programming that I know you do so many, first of all. So we're going to let our listeners also learn a little bit more about that in just a minute. But one of the things I've really appreciated about the programs like the Family Code Night is just seeing, entire families engage in learning together. And so what have you seen? Well, that's my question to you. What have you seen really happens when parents, when caregivers, children, siblings, when they're all participating in tech learning as a unit? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think well first and foremost, we see a barrier taken down. I know childcare is one of the largest barriers that we have in our community. So when we started Family Code Nights, that really was the intentionality behind it, was what is a way that we can bring, digital literacy to the community while also removing some of the barriers. And of course, that was providing a venue or an event where a family could come together. So right there is, really wanting families to be able to experience tech together, to be able to just have, whether that's like 90 minutes of time they're able to spend. And so we see students really engage. We see, youth coming and really loving the programs that we're doing, and really being able to have the opportunity to show their parents or their guardians what they're interested in. And then also we kind of see that parent light up when they see, their youth doing well or trying to work through some of the challenges and struggles and feeling supported in the room. And then also when they can see that this could be a potential pathway, I think is really what ends up being really exciting, is that parents can see that, not only for their children, but sometimes even then for themselves. So we've had adults that have been able, to join different tech programs or perhaps like pivot in their careers, as well as then, of course, having students who have really been able to engage and find something that not only interests them, but something that they could potentially build a career path from.
Yeah, no, and it starts early on. You're absolutely right. If they get the right exposures, it might just spark that interest. And
Absolutely.
I've seen this personally because my sons have been part of your program, and I've seen just the firsthand experience that they've had. They've gained so much confidence just through these experiences. So we're so grateful to you. But I want to dig a little bit deeper. Is there maybe a particular story or an aha moment that really just captures some of the impact of the work that you're doing? A story that maybe our listeners could really enjoy?
Yes, I want to say there are so many. Um,
I
right.
can only
But
imagine.
yes. And of course, I also want to say I do really appreciate your sons coming as youth navigators. That's been a really, really cool highlight. And perhaps honestly, that might even be one of the stories. We did not start our Family Code Nights with youth navigators. For a while, it was just me and, other adult volunteers. And as I started to see youth getting more interested, getting more familiar, really being able to fly through, this content. I was like, why are we not having them lead? Like, why are we not asking them, to take part in this? And then also being able to watch our youth navigators, like you said, blossom. I remember the first session that your sons came to, and it was incredible to watch not only them, but then the way that they were received. I noticed students being a lot more open to having them come over and help them. But then also your sons, especially at the end, reading off like the names of the certificates after people completed it and saying an encouraging word like, you did it, way to go. Like that stands out to me because it was so impactful watching youth lead youth. And I think something that we don't often give them credit for as adults. I think sometimes we forget that sometimes, youth can be our biggest teachers. And especially in those moments where our youth navigators have really, really thrived. So that of course is something that sticks out to me. And again, just those parent interactions at the end of the night when I have a parent that comes up to me and says, "Oh my goodness, thank you. I didn't know like what my child, was interested in, or thank you for giving me this time to connect with them on something that they love doing. And now I know we can do this together." Those moments really stand out.
Yeah, you're truly building trust. That's incredible. And I didn't know this was something new. I thought you always had the youth navigators. How
No,
incredible to learn that.
yeah, no, not the entire time. So your
Wow.
sons were the first, which is exciting.
Well, it just goes to show that, you're evolving and letting the program organically grow in different directions and incorporating new elements, testing it out. I mean, that's part of innovation. So, kudos to you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
But just in reflecting on the confidence building, and again, my sons also did this for the first time. But the technical skills that they developed, from the work that you were leading. I think that was incredible. And now this summer, they're part of Buffalo Prep. Got to give them a shout out. And they're partnering with, I believe the school, it's the UB School of Education, and they're doing a ton of hands-on AI learning experience. But it was really
Amazing.
because some of the early on experience and exposure with TechBuffalo. So thank you for cultivating that interest in them.
Wow, I love that.
So, going right into this next question, from your perspective, why is it so important to create opportunities for youth to not only learn, but also lead? Why is that so important?
Because leadership changes the way that you think of yourself, right? It changes the way you see yourself. I think it gives you so much encouragement to know that you can communicate with others in really effective ways, and it allows you to take that opportunity from being that learner and being able to shape what worked for you and turning that and giving that back to somebody else. So I think there's so much power in that, and understanding that we don't have to be, quote, older, to be a leader. Like I said, oftentimes children are great leaders and youth are great leaders, and we can absolutely learn from them, even in small ways. And so giving youth the opportunities while we're still really able to help guide them, well, we're still learning from them, and also helping them understand that the knowledge that they have now and the skills that they have now have value, and they are able to share that. And so again, thinking about your sons, I didn't realize that was their first, or, some of their first interactions with, technology and learning about AI. And so I love that, knowing that now that's something that they want to continue, but also already seeing, the fabulous leaders that they already are. And just the patience and communication skills that they have. So good job to you also with that. But yeah, youth leadership really does create, I think, like just a different kind of learning environment. And for whatever reason, we've really seen a ton of success in that. And I think, having students be able to take what they're learning and teach other people will ultimately only serve them, even more as they get into the workforce.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think, the key word there is you're talking about inclusivity, and you're being very intentional about it. And it's not just the age brackets, but also just their skill level, where they're coming from. You're setting a stage where everyone can be successful and thrive. You touched on this a little bit earlier on in the podcast, breaking barriers to tech. And so I think for a lot of people, they still see technology as intimidating, or they see it as something that's just not for them. That's just the tech folks will figure the technology part out, right? What are ways that you personally or professionally, how do you challenge some of that narrative? And then what are some of the biggest barriers that you see when it comes to tech access and inclusion? You can think of it maybe from a TechBuffalo perspective, or here in Western New York, just some of the things that you see. How do we challenge that narrative, and some of those biggest barriers when it comes to tech access and inclusion?
Sure. I first like to say, I think I was one of those people, at one point. And especially now too, like working so close to tech, I always like to tell people I'm not a technologist. I am very tech adjacent. I, of course, use tech in my everyday life, and I, love what tech has given us within the community and the skills that we're able to build on it. But I absolutely understand that, apprehension and like that feeling intimidating, because I think for so long we were taught that tech was one thing, and that
Right.
was, coding, or, that was something that I was like, oh, I can't do that. So just even right away, breaking it down to something like a family code night that's gamified instantly kind of removes, okay, that fear. Once you add in that it's Minecraft, you have all these ages that are really excited about participating in that. So I think just right away kind of challenging that narrative and making it feel human and fun and creative, and connected. Like the the first half an hour of family code night is eating pizza or, some type of dinner that we brought. You're taking the time to, say hi to the people around you, get familiar with what we're going to be working on before we even really dive into what the session will hold. So I think right then and there, people then already start to feel a little bit more comfortable, or okay, I can do this. And I think a lot of programs in Western New York can be successful doing that and kind of incorporating, that creativity and that connectiveness. But I do think, of course, there's still a lot of barriers, unfortunately. There are a lot of things around degrees and just, what even I would say in the workforce, even what jobs require, to get hired and things that now that we're seeing with tech might not really be necessary, right? And it's more about that experience and that exposure. Of course, like a big part of Family Code Night was even having devices. We didn't want to have organizations or communities that were inviting us in to have to worry about having, access to devices or inconsistent technology. So that was something, that we wanted to be able to provide. So when I think about that, that really comes to mind as well. Just so many places in Western New York that still don't even have consistent access, or the infrastructure. Again, lack of exposure, right? They don't necessarily have people that look like them that are coming in and talking to them about tech. So there are, again, still those barriers or lack of feeling like you're welcome in the space. And so I would say that's really, again, what our programs really try to hit on is that, letting people see themselves in tech, letting them understand that this is something that you can do, we can help you get access to, and you'll be good at this, right? This is something that you can, you will thrive at. So really lowering that barrier to entry is really important. But again, that can look like a lot of different barriers in our goal at TechBuffalo. And my personal goal, of course, is to help be able to provide people with the tools and the skills and just really ultimately the support that they may need in order to overcome some of those.
No, that's amazing. Thanks for just sharing that and humanizing it. You're absolutely right. It's there's sometimes this stigma of what a tech person should look like. And automatically we make that assumption, and it's usually male to begin with.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you break it down to, no, it's female. Now you're a Black woman. There's all of these other connotations, but really breaking through that, and saying, you know what, tech is a tool. You don't have, there isn't a profile that fits into any of this. Very much similar to you. I don't come across as a tech person. I don't remember if anyone ever called me for that, but I use technology in my everyday day-to-day life, right? Personally and professionally. So breaking through that barrier, making sure that kids see themselves through that, seeing that there isn't that expectation. I think this is fantastic. And this is why you're a great ambassador for this. And I'm so glad you're leading this at the forefront. I think you're going to really help revolutionize AI and technology usage, because you're right, by 2030, I think AI is just going to be, and being tech savvy is going to be such a strong requirement in any field, regardless of what industry you're going to try to explore. But maybe just touching on a little bit more on that when it comes to community and ecosystem building. I think the work that you're doing, number one, it's so important, but it also extends beyond the individual programs. And I know you've mentioned some of those already. I think it's really about ecosystem building. That's what I like to say. And so my question to you here is, how do you think about building a more inclusive and equitable tech ecosystem here in Western New York? I know you mentioned it in terms of the access to opportunities, making sure there's diversity in our thought leaders in the work, reflecting all of that stuff. But what are some things that maybe other leaders can also learn from in the work that you're leading in TechBuffalo?
Yeah. And right. So anything that is inclusive, especially something within a large ecosystem, it has to be built intentionally, I think is something that oftentimes I know can feel frustrating for myself. Like, why aren't we just doing this because it's the right thing to do? Right. It's something I ask all the time. And it's like, well, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Or, there are so many other reasons and things that are layered in. So I think first, just having that intentionality needs to be very present. And it can't just be about, creating more and more programs. It has to be somehow how you're connecting those programs to people, which will ultimately, change their lives, whether that is providing like a family sustaining wage or, a pivot in a career path, access to education. So I think here in Western New York, we have all of that. And we have, really great schools, and we have training providers and employers and colleges, we nonprofits, we have it all here. And we really do have that community piece. I think it just needs to be more of a thread, and more of opportunities given to people or to individuals who, like we were saying before, don't necessarily fit that mold or, maybe fit that idea. That also really helps with being able to help kind of like spark that interest. So it goes back again to, I think, working younger. So it's something that, at TechBuffalo for a while, we only worked within adult programming. That started at 16 plus. And now, we're realizing, oh no, this starts way earlier. And now we consider ourselves, K to gray, right? Where it's like, we will work with you at a young age, we'll work with you at an older age, because that thread is the most important part. And really helping then, employers see that talent doesn't always look like that traditional packaging. And so what are ways that as an employer, you can perhaps, expand and being more intentional about the individuals you hire, or, the work that you're doing in the community. And so I think that ultimately is what's going to help us bring more inclusivity, is making sure that we're able to show those connections at each piece along the way, and why it's valuable and why that piece matters. So, my programs, or I'd say our programs, don't exist without employers. And so going to those employers and saying, hey, what are things that you need for people to have when they come work with you? And then building that, into our Power Up Tech College program, and then building that into our K through 12 programming and, the individuals that we work with. So that way we know that those, jobs and things will be available to people, and they'll be ready for those.
No, that's awesome. Rachel, for any of our listeners that have family members or friends that are in the range of the K through gray, is that what you said? I love the term.
K to gray. Yeah.
K to gray. I've only heard 8 to 80. So I love
I like that too.
Right? It's there was another program they called it 8. If you can inspire and work with an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, it's going to be successful. So the K to gray, I think it's just as awesome. So for any of our listeners, Rachel, who aren't too familiar with TechBuffalo, or maybe even listeners outside of Western New York, can you tell us a little bit more about TechBuffalo, the great program that they're doing? We just would love to learn a little bit more about that.
Sure. So TechBuffalo is a nonprofit organization working on building an inclusive, sustainable, and accessible tech workforce here in Western New York. So really what we've been talking about this entire time is we want to be that connector. So we want to act as a connector for somebody, in elementary school, somebody in college, somebody entering the workforce. So we have, programs set at kind of each of those points, but really making sure that we are able to tie everything, I would say, to the innovation economy, and recognizing that Buffalo is a booming, tech hub and tech city, and we had the capabilities here. And so we want to keep the talent here, and recognizing that growth and development starts at a young age. So really making sure that we're able to help people connect all the dots at any point, in their career or their journey into tech.
Yeah, thanks for giving us that high level. So looking ahead, because I know you talked a little bit about the future and what to expect, but what are some of the things that really excite you most about the future of your work and just the direction that a lot of these programs are heading? So think of, for a young person or even a parent listening tonight who may be curious about technology, but just not so sure where to begin, what advice would you give them?
Sure. I think I'm most excited to see, and I keep saying connections, but I really am. I'm most excited to see, especially as we're building out our K through 12 programming, the connections that are happening in schools, they're translating, to families, to industry. So that all is starting to, I think, really become part of the same conversation, which I think is really important. We've really been able to expand, thinking about where Family Code Night started, where I saw, I think 500 people in the first year, whereas now that we've expanded to our innovation fellowships and are able to actually support teachers who are running tech clubs and Family Code Nights in their communities, we've already seen over 3,500 people, and really been able to work them through programming there. So I think I'm really excited to see people seeing themselves in tech here in Buffalo and really feeling like they don't have to leave in order for them to be able to achieve that. And I'm also just really excited to see like this next, I'd say, wave of like students, right? And it's kind of that creativity when they have the tools and when they have those invitations. What is that going to look like? This is the first generation that is being raised, with AI and with just so much accessibility. And while that, requires a lot of responsibility, I'm really excited to see what they do with it, and see how they continue to shape our community and continue to remove barriers to their own success. So that's really what feels exciting to me, a future that matches the community that we know Western New York has. It feels like we're due, right? So it feels like it's bubbling up and it's here. And what are ways that we can just continue to propel it forward is, I think, what people need to be asking themselves at every point, but knowing that there's definitely that possibility and excitement is
absolutely.
Really cool.
It's possible and it's going to happen because you're part of that work. Rachel, for anyone that wants to get in touch with you, learn a little bit more, feels like the podcast was too short and they want to have an entire in-depth conversation with you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yes, well, I would love that. Very open to, coffee conversations and people staying curious. Definitely feel free to check out our website. Feel free to connect with me via email, whatever works, I think, or, invite us to come connect with your students. Like if you're a teacher or administrator, kind of really, I would say, or even if you're an employer, we can talk to you about Power Up Tech. There are so many ways that we can, connect with you and kind of figure out what potentially would work best. But I'm around for sure. So definitely available if people want to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. And if you can't get hold of her, get hold of me and I will get hold of her for you. Rachel is in very high demand. But, in all honesty, Rachel, just thank you so much for just taking the time to join us tonight and for sharing both your personal story, your professional story, and just the incredible work that's happening here in TechBuffalo. Again, I truly appreciate not only the work that you do, but just the way that you create spaces. You're so intentional about it, where families, young people, and just communities feel seen, they feel welcomed and empowered within technology. And then on a personal note, thank you for the impact that these programs have had on my own children. We're definitely going to keep you in the loop to see how they progress. And to everyone that's tuning in tonight, thank you for joining us for another episode of Techie Turbo. We hope tonight's conversation inspired you to think differently about technology, about leadership, about community, and just the power of creating access for everyone. Again, my name is Joria Dahir, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.